Can't let you see the finished product just yet. While I've been using mechanical keyboards for gaming for about a decade now, this is my first time getting into the modding and building side of the hobby. This Keychron K6 is my first project. I learned enough along the way that I thought it might be useful to make a video for any beginners who might be in the same place. First things first, why mechanical keyboards? Why bother modding or building a keyboard, or why bother with mechanical keyboards at all? When it comes down to it, keyboards are tools. And why wouldn't you use the best tool for any job that you're doing? People pick their cars based on what they use them for, how they look, how they sound, how it makes them feel. Similarly, people pick their kitchen appliances and utensils based on the things they create and consume. Not everyone needs a stand mixer, and maybe one person wants to have a more elaborate coffee setup than someone else. If you're someone who inputs a lot of text on a computer, which is a lot of people these days, why not have the best tool for the job? Maybe you're not at the coffee snob level of wanting to have a keyboard built completely from parts, but maybe you want something a little more than what something off the shelf might offer you. This is hardly an original thought, and in fact Taeha Types has a great video on the subject on his channel that I'll link to in the description. Now more specifically, let me cover why I decided to take on this specific project, why a K6 or why just Keychron in general. It started off with two desires. First off, I wanted a mechanical keyboard I could use at my office job while still being respectful to my coworkers noise-wise. This both sounded like a very practical outcome and kind of a fun challenge if I'm being honest. There's something very satisfying about having built something with your own two hands and knowing it inside and out. That way if it ever needs repairs or service, you already know it and there's no fear about opening it and working on it yourself, much like building a gaming PC. And second, at home I use both a Mac OS computer and a Windows computer on the same desk. Currently, when switching between these computers, I also switch keyboards between a Keychron K2 for the Mac and a Logitech G Pro for the gaming PC. I admittedly don't switch between them very often, but it is a friction point I would like to get rid of, and it would tidy up my desk a little bit while I'm at it. To serve this purpose, I've actually got a Keychron K8 coming from their Kickstarter that'll take what I learned on modding the K6 and apply it to the K8. I may also make a video on that keyboard, but I'm imagining it's going to be a pretty similar process, so I may not. Now that begs the question, 3 Keychron keyboards, what do you like about them so much? Well, there's a couple things. The first two things that originally drew me to the Keychron keyboards is that they're both a designed for Mac mechanical keyboard and they're wireless. I've been using mechanical keyboards for about a decade now, as I've mentioned, but only on Windows and only for gaming. When it came time to get one for my Mac, it became clear if I wanted those two things, Keychron was pretty hard to beat. So when I wanted to take on this first modding project and knew it would be for my Mac at work, I looked back to Keychron. Not only does the K6 have the same Mac-friendly layout and wireless connectivity, it also has a hot swap PCB, making replacing the switches a literal snap. An additional perk of the way the Keychron keyboards is set up is that, at least in my scenario with the two computers on one desk, it makes it really easy to switch between the two computers. To use it with the Windows PC, I'll leave the USB-C cable plugged in and just flip it to wired mode. And then when I want to use it on my Mac, I'll flip the same switch over to wireless mode and be ready to go immediately. Some other niceties of their keyboards are the minimal look, the fact that it uses a USB-C connector instead of a legacy micro USB connector, and then it can pair up to 3 Bluetooth devices at once. This allows me to easily switch over to the iPad on my desk with just a keystroke. I don't do this often, but again, it's just nice to have. I actually bought the K6 and backed the K8 on the same day, not totally sure which would end up at the office and which would stay at home for my desk. When the K6 arrived, it quickly became apparent that I used the function keys more than I thought while I was gaming. You do have access to the function keys on the K6, even with its smaller layout, but it's through a layer system, which is a little tedious in the heat of a moment while playing games. Since I'm used to gaming on a 10 keyless layout on the Logitech G Pro, the K8 will fit the bill perfectly when it arrives. Additionally, I don't use the function keys as often or in the same way on my Mac, either at home or at work, so the K6 was bound for the office and it was time to make it quiet. Starting with a stock Keychron K6, I applied 4 mods to make it as quiet as possible. First, I replaced the stock Gateron Red switches with ZealPC Roselios switches. Second, I lubricated the switches with Krytox 205G0 lubricant, and then I modded the stabilizers by lubing them, clipping them, and applying a Band-Aid mod to the PCB. Third, I filled the case of the keyboard with neoprene foam, and fourth, I replaced the stock ABS keycaps with PBT keycaps. I performed these 4 mods separately for sake of recording this video and sound test between each step, but if you're doing something like this yourself, you can do them all at once unless you want to see the difference happen step by step as well. Let's start with the switches. I originally ordered my K6 with Gateron brown switches, as all the mechanical keyboards I've used up until now also had tactile switches. It's up to you if you consider the Gateron browns tactile, but that's just where I was going with it. However, before pulling the trigger on a full set of aftermarket switches for the K6, I ordered 4 switch testers so I could see what I like and what was in the market now. I'll leave a link to these switch testers below. As soon as I got them, it actually became really apparent that I like the linear switches quite a bit more than I thought I would, and I landed on the ZealPC Rosilio switches. Going in, I thought I'd be going with the Xylence from ZealPC, which are their tactile switches that still have the silenced stems like the Rosilios do. If you're going into this hobby, I think it's really valuable to get some key switch testers or get your hands on a couple keyboards from friends or something like that to really try out the switches. You may be surprised by what you actually like in a keyboard. Once the switches arrived, replacing the stock switches was really easy because of that hot swap PCB. It involved removing the keycaps and key switches, both of which there's a tool included with the keyboard for, snapping in the new switches, and putting the keycaps back on. Afterwards, there was a huge difference immediately in the sound of the keyboard. Additionally, the keyboard felt more consistent and just premium to type on. Next up was pulling all the switches back out to lubricate them, and additionally modifying the stabilizers at this time. Opening and lubricating the switches is actually quite easy, it's just tedious. The process is made much easier with a couple tools and following a tutorial or two. I used this key switch opener from KeyBoss, which was the most improvement out of any tool. And I also followed this tutorial also from Taeha types. I'll link to both in the description. Once I had all the switches out, I opened them and separated them into their individual parts. I did this all at once because your hands do get a little messy during the lubrication process, even with these tools. Once they were all apart and I had my Krytox, paintbrushes, and jeweler's grip, I put on a movie and got to lubricating. After lubricating all of my switches, I moved on to modifying the stabilizers following yet another Taeha types video. Link in the description. This was a breeze too. However, one quick warning with the Keychron. The screws that attach the PCB to the plate of the keyboard are quite cheap, and I actually stripped the heads on one of them when trying to remove it. Fortunately, on this keyboard, the holes in the plate are large enough that you can apply the band-aids through those holes as long as you have a pair of tweezers or a similar tool. After the lubrication was done and the band-aids were on, the keyboard took another major step up. It really felt even more consistent somehow, and the word I keep coming back to is premium. It just felt better to type on and sounded better to type on. The keys with the stabilizers underneath them especially sound better now. The Keychron K6 stabilizers come pre-lubricated, but cleaning them off and applying more lubricant did help the situation quite a bit. You can no longer hear the plastic rubbing in the switches, and the most prominent sound was the case noise at this point. That brings us to our last internal mod, which is filling the case with foam to cut out this reverberation. Filling the case with foam was very easy too. This is best done while you already have the PCB out to modify the stabilizers. Since the foam I picked was adhesive backed, all I had to do was cut it into the largest possible shapes that would fit, cut around screw posts, and stick it into the bottom of the case. I was able to get 2 layers into the case of the K6. Smaller keyboards might have room for less foam, or you might need thinner foam in general. I'll link to the foam I used below. I avoided putting any between the upper left foot of the keyboard and the battery, as this is where the connector for the battery lies when the PCB is installed in the keyboard. I also avoided the switches and USB-C port on the left side of the case for this reason. Additionally, I avoided putting any on or near the battery, both for heat reasons and because lithium-ion batteries expand and contract slightly while in use, so I didn't want to crowd the space. Lastly, I also put foam into the hollow underside of the spacebar to see if this would improve the acoustics at all. The result of this last internal mod is that the case ping and reverberation is functionally gone. I compared it to my K2, which has a very similar case, both typing and tapping on the back, and the difference was night and day. This is a mod I would recommend doing to any keyboard that has some dead space in it. Interestingly, while making the whole keyboard quieter, the spacebar actually appeared louder now, both before and after putting foam in it. Last but certainly not least, keycaps. Mechanical keyboard keycaps are a whole rabbit hole and hobby onto their own. There's full sets, there's novelties, there's artisans, there's so many options. The hardest part about buying keycaps is that they're often sold in what are called group buys. Basically, you have to purchase the keycaps before they're even produced, wait for them to be produced, and then shipped to you, which can be months or up to a year in some situations that I've heard. The worst part is that after these group buys, many keycaps don't get a second run. That does, however, mean that the secondhand and aftermarket market for keycaps is alive and well. Not wanting to go too far down that rabbit hole myself, I gave myself some pretty simple rules for the keycaps I was looking for. I wanted them to be PBT, to look good with the Keychron keycaps if I had to mix and match, I'll explain that in a second, and to have a modern, professional looking legend on them. I wanted them to be PBT because PBT generally has better both visual and acoustic characteristics than ABS, which is what the stock Keychron keycaps are made of. The Keychron stock keycaps are actually quite good in my experience, but PBT would just be that much better, and why not go for gold as long as I was replacing parts. I wanted them to look good mixed with the Keychron keycaps because the Keychron K6 has kind of a unique layout with some oddly sized keys. So I might end up in a situation where I could only find a kit that I could replace my alpha keys and my spacebar on. And lastly, I just wanted that legend to look nice. I didn't want a crazy gamer font, I just wanted something modern, professional, easy to read. I did end up finding a PBT keycap set from AliExpress that I quite liked. It faded from a cool pink to blue in a gradient, however, I would only be able to replace the alpha keys and the space bars I had kind of feared. But the legend was also side printed, which I thought was cool, so I went ahead and ordered the kit. Shipping from AliExpress is not the fastest since you're often buying products directly from China, and in the meantime, I found another keycap set online that I really liked. This was the NP PBT keycap set from KBD fans. Quite the mouthful. It's PBT, has really cool legends, some really cool novelty keys, and best of all, has the Mac modifiers and all the key sizes I would need to fill out the complete K6. But, as I mentioned, it was out of stock. I figured it was another group buy that was lost to the sands of time, but it did have a little email notification box, which I signed up for. I figured if it ever came back in stock, I could always buy it then. Replacing keycaps is pretty easy. However, I got that, hey, it's back in stock email between ordering the set from AliExpress and that set from AliExpress arriving. So I've still got that kit from AliExpress sitting on my kitchen table. Maybe I'll end up using it for my K8. Another bonus of that kit from KBD fans is that it comes with a full keyboard layout. Since the K6 is a 65% layout, I've still got a lot of keycaps left over from that set, including the numpad. I'm currently in a group buy for the Tentaku calculator kit, and I'll probably end up using those keycaps on that calculator. I think it'll look really nice. If you're interested in seeing a video about that kit when it arrives, let me know in the comments below. After that set of keycaps arrived in the mail, it was time for the last step and the easiest step of the project. These keycaps look and feel great. They've got a matte, almost sandblasted finish to them. The legends look awesome, and the novelty keycaps are just great. They look awesome on the keyboard. The sound while typing is much different with the PBT keycaps. It's much more of a low sound now. Additionally, these keycaps seem to have resolved the issue I had with my spacebar being louder after filling the case with foam. These keycaps are also a different profile, which is a little bit flatter and I'm actually quite enjoying. And with that, my first semi-custom mechanical keyboard is done. It looks awesome, feels great to type on, and is just as quiet as I hoped for. So now, let's get on to the sound tests. I recorded all these clips with the same setup, the same microphone, the same levels, the same distance from the keyboard, everything, to give as objective as possible of a comparison. Additionally, I included my unmodded Keychron K2 with Gateron Brown switches, and my unmodded Logitech G Pro keyboard with Romer G tactile switches. Overall, I'm very happy with how this project turned out, and I can't wait to take what I learned over to the K8. There are two things I didn't do on my K6 that I think I'm going to try on my K8. First, I want to try using switch films. I'll leave a video down below explaining what exactly it is switch films do. The fit of the switch housings, even with the Resilios, wasn't quite as consistent as I would like it to be. I think switch films might resolve this. I've actually already ordered some and may try them on my K6 too. If it's interesting enough, I may make a short video about that. And second, I want to try some aftermarket stabilizers. Even after lubing and modding, the left end of my spacebar still sounds just a little bit metallic. I think some aftermarket parts might help here. I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something that might help you along your way if you're modding a keyboard or building one for the first time. As the final slide on this video, I'll leave up a full table of the parts, tools, and supplies I purchased to make this project possible, so you can get a ballpark idea of what this might cost you if you choose to do the same. If you've got any questions or feedback, leave me a comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you. Additionally, if you would like to see videos about the K8 or Tentaku when they arrive, also leave a comment about that below. Thanks for watching.